Greetings. My name is Stephen Gresham, and I am the faculty director here at Downloader School of Yoga, and I'm happy to be a part of this festival. And so originally I had in mind to do a sort of fast, flow, and then I thought this morning that at times, given how much everyone is going through, that there can be great utility and taking moments to slow down, to find a sense of centeredness. And by that, I mean that isn't the absence of any type of difficulty. I think difficulties are abundant, that every corner that we turn, that there could be an experience that can be uprooting, and so one benefit of practice is using the breath and to use the breath and movement as a way of finding a sense of groundedness. That while things might be happening around us, to use your practice to be able to come back to the present moment and to be able to ride the breath as a way of arriving right there on your mat. And so we'll try to slow it down just for the time that we get to share together. And so for class, what you'll need is a block or two. And so I'll instruct when we get to use the blocks. 2 blankets, and again, I will instruct how to fold up the blankets when we get to that point, as well as a bolster. And if you don't have a bolster, get as many, pillows as you'd like, and just use what you might have available to you so that you might find practice enjoyable. And so I'll give you about 10 seconds just to locate that. And so again, 2 blocks, 2 blankets, and a bolster. All right. And so as you get all of your materials, I invite us to start seated on our mat. And so you can come to your mat, and when you're seated, you can have the hips elevated on a block or a blanket. And so find a way to allow yourself to be lifted so that your pelvis is neither spilling forward or back. Allow yourself to have a neutral pelvis. And when you close your eyes, because I invite you to close your eyes, I want you to be able to feel this rather than just, looking at the screen. And so even if you have the screen off or you're turned away from the screen, I invite you to just notice how this might feel in your body. And so you're sitting, and you have your forearms on your thighs, palms up. And so your eyes are closed, and, as you begin, you might shimmy the shoulders, and you might, dip the head to one side or the next, just as a way of just locating the body. Just notice how it feels. And so it's your body, so you'll explore it as you see fit. And then in the sides of the body, the lateral sides, rather than just, trying to sit up nice and straight by, forcing your body to do so, see if you can use the breath to elongate the spine. And so your hands just for a moment might be on the lateral sides, and just see if you can move the hands with the breath. And so you're just noticing the ins and outs of the breath. And you might even be aware that the side ribs just slightly begin to create space, and they move against the hands. And just enjoy that sensation just for a second. And you might be aware that with every subsequent breath, that you take the breath in through the nose and you allow it to inflate the sides of the body. And the breath, it slowly drips all the way towards the chest, towards the stomach, towards the space between your buttocks and the mat. Right? And so there's a nice long line. And so you just continue to breathe, and just notice as you breathe, you can create space in the spine. And by space, I mean you just elongate the spine. And so everyone, you could have your arms, they can stay here, or you can release your forearms onto your thighs. And feel free to turn on any music that feels nice and soothing for you. And so we begin our movement today just nice and slow. And so as you're sitting in your seated meditation with the forearms on your thighs, allow the palms to face up. And as you face the palms up, just notice how that might roll the shoulders slightly back, creating a broadness in the chest. And with that broadness, just to be aware if there is a difference in the quality and the depth of the breath as it moves. Inviting the breath in. Noticing maybe the smoothness of the breath as it just travels in through the nose and mouth. Being aware, right, as that breath, it slowly makes its way in the back of the throat, and it sends that cooling sensation just in that space. The breath slowly moves over the shoulders. As you continue with the ins and the outs of that breath, just notice when it reaches the heart space, the chest. Observe as the chest, it rises and falls in relationship to the breath. Be aware, right, as how that breath, it moves over the arms towards the elbows. It slowly drips its way towards the navel. And in your mind's eye, you're traveling the length of the breath. And you're not forcing the body to do something different than what it is, but just allow the body to meet the breath and the breath to meet the body. And as that breath reaches the stomach, see if there's an awareness, right, of how that breath, it expands the stomach. It creates space, right? And where there's space, there are opportunities for freedom. And by freedom, it's not being confined to what we assume to be true or confined to our limitations, but we can find expansion. And the first way that we can find expansion is where the breath might be able to move. And as you slowly continue to connect with the breath, you might also be aware that the ability to hear the sounds around you might have a different quality to it. So without judgment, just simply be aware of how when you connect with the breath, how maybe the different sensations, the different abilities that each and every one of you has, how that might come online just slightly differently. You allow yourself to continue with that breath, allowing a sense of ease. Really, you're not forcing that breath, but there's a sense of easiness with how that breath, it's invited into the body and it just snakes its way. Finding those spaces inside the body that are needing of that breath and that attention. And so one of the things we have to learn how to do is to get out of the way. And by getting out of the way, it's not thinking too much. It's not forcing that breath to do something different than it desires to do. But you create space, right? You create expansion. You just notice how the mind might create limitations, and you just continue to breathe. All right, everyone. As the forearms remain on the thighs, I invite us to take 10 breaths. Inhale through the nose. And gently let it go, right? We don't hold on to the breath. It's followed by a next breath in. And the next breath out. Everyone, you have 8 more breaths. Taking it nice and easy. At times we rush, right? We're always on the go. We have things to do. We have things to worry about. There's so much worry. And those worries, they won't stop, right? When there's one that seems done, there's always another one around the corner. So what we can do is to take these precious moments to nourish the self, to be able to create strength in how we sit and how we exist, so that when these stressors show up, we have a greater ability to sway with it. Everyone, you have 5 more breaths. Just 2 more. And last one, breathe in. Allowing that breath to be just as expansive as it needs to be for you. And you just let it go. All right, allow the palms to join. Eyes remaining closed, but I invite you to have your thumb knuckles resting against the chest. And so this becomes a moment just for you. A moment for you to be able to think of something that means something to you. Something that you can breathe into your practice, right? Something that can invigorate the movement, that can enliven the breath. And so this becomes your moment to dedicate your practice. And whether something comes to mind or not, I invite each and every one of you to think about time. We've become so aware that time at moments can be seen as a luxury. We just assume that we have time until we realize we don't. And so I invite you to use every single moment to be aware of time and to be able to enjoy it and to be able to lean into it fully. And so whatever your intention, whatever your dedication, hold it with compassion with the breath in and the single breath out. All right, allow the arms to rest by the side. We're going to stay seated just for the beginning. And so if you ever come to any of my classes, a lot of this will look familiar. And so when you're seated, allow the left hand to be on the left side of the left thigh. So your fingertips are facing the left side. And so send the right hand towards the ceiling and we breathe. And so spread the fingertips nice and wide. But I really, for a moment, want you to just feel the side ribs. And so the left hand is your stability, but when you reach through the right fingertips, just see if you can elevate that hand, not by jerking at the shoulder and the armpit, but by breathing into the side ribs. And so just be gentle. And when you're gentle, just notice that the body will deliver. And so take a long breath in and a long breath out. Everyone, right hand comes just between the shoulder blades. You reach the left hand up and it reaches for the right elbow. And when you take your breath in, feel elevated by the side ribs. And then you gently, with the left hand, guide the right elbow towards the left side. And so continue to find breath. You create expansion in the side ribs. And when you exhale, descend the lower ribs back towards the body. One more breath in. And a long breath out. Everyone, right hand comes towards the left thigh. Left hand comes gently behind the low back towards the mat. And so you take your breath in, find that lift up from the low back and the hips. And then you take your gentle seated twist towards the left. And so don't turn just by jerking the head Invite the chest to be lifted, and then you use the right hand as your anchor, inviting the chest towards the left side. Single breath in. And a single breath out. Everyone return to center, forearms on the thighs, palms up, eyes remaining closed. Take 2 breaths. And so throughout our time, I invite you don't have to have the eyes open, right? And if you choose to have them be open just for instruction, you could do so. But I invite you to have your eyes closed as a way of just connecting to the body. Allow your body to dictate what this looks like, right? Not just what my body looks like. To the other side, right hand comes on the floor, fingertips facing the right side. Left hand is high. And remember, spread the fingertips nice and wide. And then ascend the left hand. And then you're just feeling it, right? And so you might sit into the left and to the right tip. And you just feel the body reaching through the left fingertips. You take your breath in. And you take your breath out. Everyone, left hand comes just between the shoulder blades. Remember to lift with the breath through the sides of the body. Right hand reaches up, grab for the left elbow. Lift up through the side ribs. Take your breath in. And then you gently invite the left elbow towards the right. And you might notice the sensation in the left tricep as well as in the left side body. So just notice it without judgment. You just take your time. Observe it. Drink it in. Breath in. And then everyone, left hand comes onto the right side. Right hand comes on the mat just behind the back. Lengthen through the spine. And then gentle seated twist towards the right. Allow the chest to begin the movement. Single breath. Return to center, forearms on the thighs, palms up, 3 breaths. We're going to do that one more time. Left hand on the mat towards the left side. Everyone inhale, right hand is nice and high. And then as you exhale, right hand just between the shoulder blades. Take your breath in. Left hand reaches up for the right elbow. Long breath. And then you gently guide that right elbow towards the left. Single breath in. And as you exhale, right hand comes onto the left thigh. Everyone, left hand comes behind your low back onto the mat. Take your breath in. And then gently twist towards the left. Single breath. Return to center, forearms on the thighs, eyes closed, 3 breaths. So every movement becomes an opportunity for you to just be aware of the breath, how the body feels. You take your time. Like the body has a story, so we use the practice to listen. Opposite side. Right hand is on the mat. Everyone, left hand reaches up. Take your breath in. Then as you exhale, left hand just between the shoulder blades, right hand reaches up as you breathe in. And then as you reach for the left elbow, gently invite the left elbow towards the right. Single breath. Take your breath in. Everyone, left hand is on the thigh, right hand reaches back onto the mat. Your breath elongates the spine. And then you gently twist towards the right. Return to center, forearms on the thighs, palms up. Everyone sing 3 breaths. All right. You can open up your eyes. We're going to stay seated just for the beginning. If you're seated still on a block, just remove the block. Allow yourself to come to the earth, to come to your ground. And so switch the interlace of the shins. And so if you have the left shin in front of the right, bring the right shin in front of the left. Sit up nice and tall. And then as you have the legs crossed, everyone walk the hands towards the front of your mat. Fold over your legs. And so just find extension through the armpits as far forward as you can go. And then you can allow the forehead to rest towards the mat. And depending on how much mobility you have, you might notice that the forehead doesn't meet the mat, which is fine, right? And so this is all about progress and knowing kind of what your body desires to do. And so if your forehead doesn't meet the mat, that's fine. Just use blocks, right? And so you can stack blocks. Reach the hands forward, and then you can allow the forehead to rest on the block. And you have this awareness, right? And so you can get into this shape, folding over the thighs. And then if you are aware, right, that you might be struggling or really pushing for the forehead to meet the earth or the block, struggle less. Because every time you try to force something, we might be desiring to do more, right? We're struggling towards an outcome rather than just being where we're at. And so I invite you during our time, right, don't struggle for the outcome. Like the goal is just to be where you are in the present moment. And so forehead melts towards whatever it decides to melt towards. And you take 10 breaths. And you allow the ins and outs of that breath to be as long as it needs to be. Breathing in from the nose, and you allow the breath to move across the shoulders and down the back. And with your exhale, it's sort of like this really cool blanket that just is draped over the body. And just with every subsequent breath, just notice how your body just gives in to the moment. It's a moment that is yours. 6 more breaths. Hearing the rhythm of the breath. Allowing the eye of the mind to trace from the fingertips through the forearms up over the shoulders, down the back, across the hips, towards the knees, to your shins and toes. 2 more breaths. All right, everyone. Walk the hands up. Come back up to a seated position. We're going to do that one more time, but switch the interlace. And so opposite shin out in front. Sit up nice and tall. And then walk the hands towards the front. So remember kind of what you did on the first side. So it's your choice, but remember, be where you are. Allow the body to melt towards the mat in a way that feels useful for the body. And so I will stay seated up just so that you could hear me. But as you really crawl the body forward and then you melt and fold over the thighs, dial into the breath. And so this is an invitation about struggling less, about finding nourishment. And you can find nourishment when you take your time to enjoy it. So you have 10 breaths. Like every breath, just observing it as if it was just that first breath. Like it just is so inviting, and that first breath has so much that it desires to say, right? And we're just so curious when it's that first breath. And so when you have it and you treat it as if it was that first breath, just notice its shades and its colors and its nuances. And then your exhale, you treat the exhale as if it was the very last breath. Not attaching to the idea that it is your last breath and so you're kind of pulled to hold on. Nope. I'm inviting you that because you are just filled with so much, because of that ability to breathe, you're going to relish in the completion of that breath, right? You're going to enjoy that exhale. Because there's so much in just being able to have that breath. something, right, that is a right for every single person, but something that can be stripped away. And so you relish in that breath. Like you own that breath. Everyone, you have 4 more. It's like relishing in that breath is owning the right, right? It's owning what is yours. 2 more breaths. All right, nice job. Everyone walk the hands up, remove the blocks, and we're going to come to our child's pose. And so here's where it can be a lot of fun. And so I'll help you to demo. So you're going to come to your child's pose, but a little different. And so if you have a bolster, have your big toes touching behind you, and then you're going to sit your hips towards your heels, right? But this bolster, you're going to, place just in between the thighs. And then you're going to grab a blanket just so that in a fold that it can be in the fold that you might store the blanket in. You could have one blanket, place it just between the heels and the glutes. Give yourself a nice cushion. And then here's where the fun begins. You're going to just crawl the hands and fold over the bolster. And so rather than face down, because it might be difficult to breathe, allow the head to drape either to the right or to the left side. It is your choice. And so you don't need to see me. Feel how this feels for you. So again, drape the hands towards the front. The body folds onto the bolster. And then you send your gaze to the left or to the right side. And you allow yourself to just melt into this shape. And just notice the way that, the body sometimes can resist to giving over to the bolster, right? You might feel yourself holding on and gripping in interesting ways. And then rather than judging the tendency to grip, to hold back, because we all have that, maybe invite, what are you melting towards, right? So I'm not asking you all to melt onto your bolster just for the sake of melting towards your bolster. Because what even does melting towards your bolster mean? As you all are breathing, I want to invite you just to consider the time that we're inviting right now is just for you. And so this bolster is that opportunity to give into oneself. It's an opportunity to care for oneself, and we all have very different relationships regarding caring for oneself. We can have so much energy, we can feel like it's easy to care for other people, right? But that when it comes to oneself, it's like, I just don't have time. Like we can just be so selfless. And forgetting that in order to sustain that, we must be able to do that for oneself. We must be able to find moments of rest. We must be able to find those moments of compassion. We must be able to lean into oneself, and that self leans back. And so this bolster is that opportunity to lean into oneself and to have that same self give you that hug. And so this hug is all of that support that each and every one of you is deserving of. And so when there's an invitation to melt towards your bolster, it is an invitation for each and every one of you to give yourself that moment, that support, that compassion, and that time that you are so deserving of. And so while I will stay seated up, give yourself that time, 10 breaths. allowing the head to be as heavy towards the bolster as it desires to. You might even be aware that the forearms allow them to be heavy on your mat. Rather than tensing in the upper back, can you allow the shoulders to lean in? To be able to give in. And by give in, right, it's not just giving in to something that can't give back, it can't support. Then you allow the shoulders to give in because this mat and this bolster, it's predictable. It is kind, right, because this is your mat. It is supportive because this is the space that you create. And so you allow yourself to lean in, right, from the upper back to the mid back to the low back. And you just notice the way that the body, when you just exhale, it's like that moment where you don't have to be everything for everyone else. You just get to be. 5 more breaths. 4 more breaths. Breathing in. Breathing into the back of the body as you lay on your bolster, and then you find the exhale. You allow the stomach to melt just so purposefully. 4 more breaths. Every breath, remember, just like the first. Every breath you treat as if it was your last. Just 3 more. Just 2. And 1. Nice, long, joyous breath in. And you gently just let that breath go. All right, everyone, if you're laying down in your bolster, just gently walk the hands back towards the knees as you sit up. Move the bolster. I promise we will come back to the bolster in our time. As you rise up to tabletop, bring the shoulders over the wrists, hips over your knees. Come to puppy dog pose. So walk the hands forward, and you're going to keep the hips over the knees. And then as you walk the hands forward, nice length from the fingertips to the armpit, to the sides of the body towards the hip. And then you melt the heart towards the mat. And you might even be aware, right, that as you are in puppy dog pose, can you press equally down to the thumb and the pinky finger? And then allow the whole of the hand to be connected towards the mat. So rather than cupping in the palm, press the whole of the hand down. Lengthening back from the fingertips towards the hips. Take your breath in. And your breath out. Walk the hands back up to tabletop. Tuck your toes, downward facing dog. Send the hips up and back. And so in your downward facing dog, you could have a wider stance or a narrower stance, but push through the hand. Lengthen the sides of the body. The hips are up and back. 3 breaths. Maybe invite a slight bend in the knees. Breath in. And gently as you exhale, lower the knees, come to puppy dog pose. Walk the hands forward. Melt the heart down. As you're in puppy dog pose, 3 breaths. I like to share at times that another name for puppy dog pose when I was searching and just exploring different shapes is the melting heart pose, which I find to be just so interesting. And that in order to be able to care for oneself, we have to strip back those layers of protection that sometimes are rightfully put into place. But sometimes those layers keep ourselves from ourselves. And so your practice, can it be something of uncovering? Taking those moments just to reveal oneself to oneself by removing a layer that maybe is not purposeful at that moment. One more breath in and puppy dog pose. And let it go. Walk the hands up to tabletop, tuck the toes, downward facing dog. 3 breaths. One more breath in. And gently lower the knees. Come back to your last puppy dog pose and tuck the toes. Walk the hands forward. Melt the heart down. 3 breaths. Last breath. All right, everyone. Walk the hands back up to tabletop. Tuck the toes. Downward facing dog. We're going to do just some more movement before we hit our mat just to end class. And so from downward facing dog, everyone step the right foot forward towards the top of the mat. And then the left heel is going to come down and rise up to warrior one. Hands up nice and high. And so in your warrior one, I'm just going to kneel down. Feel firmly rooted through that left heel as you lift up through that left arch. And so just for a moment, in warrior one, hands on the side ribs. And remember, breathe into the side ribs. And can you find length? Can you find expansion in the ribs? And then allow that breath to continue to travel through the hands, fingertips, nice and high. And so in your warrior one, take 5 breaths. Like your warrior, your positions in your asana are about finding strength. And so how does it feel to have that firm stance? Can you feel the firmness of how you're rooted into the mat? Can you find strength, right, as you lengthen the sides of the body and the fingertips are nice and high? And maybe just for a moment, send your gaze towards the ceiling. And so what comes to mind when the fingertips are spread and your hands are reaching towards the ceiling and your gaze is there? What are you gazing towards? Take your breath in. And then find your warrior two. Adjust the back leg. And so in your warrior two, you're going to really try to parallel that front thigh with the mat. The left toes are facing the left, and then open up the stance to squeeze the shoulders. And then you gaze over the front fingertips. Can you feel firm? Can you feel a nice long spine? Can you find strength, right? So each of you is resilient. That sometimes we might doubt our own strength. And how interesting, right, that we have all of these gifts that we might doubt. So as you imagine gazing over the front fingertips in your warrior two, I want to invite you just to look at yourself. That there is you in this warrior two looking back at you. And when you're looking at yourself in this warrior two, right, eye to eye, what exactly will you say? Like, will you be kind, right? Will you be nurturing? Will you be loving? Can you invite statements of, right, you are strong and you are beautiful, right? For those who might be different for any reason, right? Maybe it's the color of one's skin, it might be gender identity, sexual orientation. Can you be beautiful because you are that? Can you give yourself that moment, right, of communicating that regardless of whatever exists in this world, right, what people might tell you about you. In this warrior two, can you give yourself time looking at you with words of love and compassion? Everyone in your warrior two, take a breath in. And your breath out. Come back to your downward facing dog. So in your warrior two, windmill the hands back down, step the feet back. And warrior two, in your downward facing dog, take 3 breaths. One more breath in. One more breath out. Other side, everyone, left foot steps forward. And then as you lower the right heel down this time, rise up to warrior one, hands up nice and high. So you've been in your warrior one before on the opposite side. And so notice how this warrior one feels. It doesn't have to be perfection, because I'm not sure what perfection is. I know what we're told perfection has to look like. And then we adopt that, and that becomes our own internal frame. And then we apply it to self, right? And then when we apply these messages to self, then we're just like, well, how come we're not measuring up? That's where all of these self-defeating thoughts come from. And so maybe in this warrior one, you're aware of these frames that you internalize and apply to self, but can you develop your own frame, starting by the foundation of your feet? That is your frame. That is the foundation that is yours. And then it slowly moves up the thighs towards the hips, and can you feel firm in the hips? Squeeze the inner thighs in. And maybe for a moment, hands come on the side ribs. Remember, breathe into the side ribs. That is your breath. And then you send the hands up nice and high, reach through the fingertips. And you continue to reach from the breath. Send your gaze towards the ceiling, right? And there is strength. There is ancestral strength in this warrior one. Take your breath in. And then open up to warrior two. Remember, adjust that back leg, parallel that front thigh. So in this warrior two, left thigh, parallel as much as you can with the mat, and then the right toes towards the right side edge. Everyone land the hands. Back hand equal towards the left. Same height. Gaze over the front fingertip. And just see if you can continue to gaze over the front fingertip, and you're just focusing, you're centering on the breath. And when you center on the breath, can you feel the heartbeat? There's something just so interesting about that when you center on the breath, you allow the chest and the shoulders to rise and fall with that inhale and exhale. You can almost feel the body vibrate in concert with that heartbeat. And that's what I love about being able to center on the breath, right? Because there's just such that sweet internal song that's always beating just for you, that you can hear just differently, right? You can hear it in all of its shades when you just notice the breath. So gaze over the front fingertips, 5 more breaths. Remember, looking at you standing in front of you, what do you say to you? How can you, right, when we're taking time, when we're not going fast, we're taking our time, how can you celebrate you? Knowing, right, that when you do so, you are so strengthened to be able to give, because you can give from a different place. Everyone, one more breath in. And you stay for your breath out. From your warrior two, windmill your hands down, come to your downward facing dog, step your feet back. From downward facing dog, 3 breaths. Everyone gently lower the knees, sit the hips back. And here is one of my favorite parts in class. People really love this. And so, excuse me, as you're sitting down, you're going to need your bolster. And so it's the long way. And so bring the soles of your feet to touch. And here you can either use a block or your blankets, but I'm going to suggest for this one your blankets. And so soles of feet to touch. With your blanket folded, place it on the outside of the knee on both sides so that your knees are nice and supported. I'm going to invite you the long way to bring the bolster just behind the top of the glute and then release the spine all the way down. And then take one block, place it just on the stomach, and then you're allowing the heads of the shoulders to roll to either side, palms facing up. Eyes closed. And you're breathing. Allowing not only the back of the head to be nice and heavy, right? You're giving into the bolster. But maybe your attention comes to your forehead and your eyebrows. That this becomes a space where we store so much emotion and so much tension, right? We furrow our eyebrows just so much. Can you send your breath into this space? Can you give your forehead that moment of just release and softening? You're not getting rid of emotions. That's not the function. But maybe you give emotion space to breathe. And then maybe the attention, moves down towards the shoulders. And when the shoulders, they can lean to either side, just there's a broadness in the chest. And that you might be aware that when there is perceived threat, that at times the body folds into itself and just always works to protect itself. And so you might just notice that people at times can fold into themselves just a bit more. Here, roll the shoulders towards the side. That rather than keeping oneself closed in, can you give yourself space and open up? Like your practice can be like the sunlight, helping to nourish those spaces that often are shaded because we fold in. So can you allow these shaded spaces to get a bit more sunlight? With the block that's over the belly, just notice the breath, slowly lifting and lowering the block. Allowing the knees to feel nice and supported on the blanket. Five more breaths. Just three more. Last one. Everyone remove the block. Remove the bolster. You can also stay there if you'd like to stay there, but we're going to move into Shavasana. And so if you want to be able to stay on the bolster, you can. Remember, you always have choices. Otherwise, grab a blanket and then release the legs long the hands long and the back of the head onto the mat. If you have a blanket, roll the blanket over yourself. And if you have maybe the other blanket or towel as you close the eyes, put that over the eyes. And then you just release. And by release, I mean allow there to be a heaviness in the back of the head. Allow the shoulders to feel nice and firm as it's connected towards your mat. The front hips melt towards the mat. And that with the heels connected, that the toes splay open. Not holding the breath, but in your Shavasana, you allow the breath to nourish. In your Shavasana, just consider, right, we've heard the phrase that time waits for no one. That we can take time for granted until that moment where we realize that time is up. That we can push away the moments to not only care for oneself and those whom we love. Like we just say, well, we have until tomorrow. But what if time never comes? And so in each moment that you have, can you appreciate it almost as if it was the first moment? And maybe appreciating it as if it might be your last. Can you allow yourself to fully engage in that moment openly, deeply, with all of you, nourishing oneself, and participating fully in life, fueled by those things which you value, giving purpose and intention to every single movement, every single breath you make and take. And so in your Shavasana, allow the breath to slightly deepen, not forcefully, but just with allowance. Allowing the breath to gently move over the jaw, almost as though you're creating space for the breath to move fully. You're just loosening the jaw. Allowing that breath to move over the shoulders, and imagine two hands just beneath the shoulders, just giving yourself gentle support, a slight lift. The breath, it slowly moves towards the elbows and the fingertips. And you notice the breath that in a knowing way it comes back to the heart space. Because the body is like, I need that breath here. That's how that breath can nourish, right? Like droplets of water on those days when the grass, it needs its own nourishment, can your breath be those droplets, almost like when it was the sun. And the breath, it continues to move towards the hips, towards the thighs, the heels, and the toe. And you may stay here, or lift and extend the hands long overhead for a long body stretch as you lengthen through the toes. Drawing the thighs towards the chest, and you gently lift to caress the knees straight from the hands around the shin. Rolling to one side, everyone, with that back hand that lifts you up to a seated position. Forearms on your thighs, palms up, eyes closed. And we will end the exact same way that we began. Unified in breath. Everyone, 10 breaths. Take a breath in. And let it go. Allow the palms to join, everyone resting the thumbs against the chest. May you appreciate the time, fully participating in it. And in that space, may you find love. May you find kindness and an abundance of compassion. And then sliding the thumb knuckles to the space between the eyebrows. And in that space, may you also find peace. With a tremendous amount of gratitude, I bow forward to each and every one of you. May you be well. Thank you for taking the time to join me in this. I am Stephen Gresham, Faculty Director at Down Under School of Yoga. I hope that you all enjoy the festival, and I hope to see each and every one of you at some point soon. Be well, stay safe, and engage in those things that matter to you.